Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's good to see you. I think you might have been at the same briefing that I attended when Putin invaded Ukraine, and we were in the skiff, and we were asking our experts, how long is this war going to last? And some of them suggested 2 weeks. Valiant people, but they're up against one of the largest militaries in the world. Here we are 4.5 years later, and the Ukrainians are still valiantly, successfully in many respects, fighting day in and day out. I've never had any doubt in my mind whose side I was on in terms of the war in Ukraine. My mother was born in Lithuania. I know the Russians through the Tsar and Soviets and the history that I've read, and I know what their ambitions are, and they're not consistent with the values of this country. I'm trying to figure out now exactly where we are as a nation when it comes to the war in Ukraine. And I think of some specifics. The $400 million that we appropriated to help the Ukrainian people fight this war has bounced back and forth. Is it finally resolved? Are we going to send this to the Ukrainians?
The $400 million?
Yes.
Yeah, that's going through the interagency process right now. In fact, I saw maybe last Friday something on it. I think you'll see news on that pretty soon.
Well, that's exactly what Secretary Higspeth said 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and nothing's happened. So here they are fighting for their lives. They're facing ballistic missiles. They don't have the defense that they need. They're valiantly doing everything they can to save their people. And we are going through some bureaucratic malaise, I'm not sure what. That is,
yeah, it's just going through the interagency process, and there were a couple stops along the way that unfortunately got tied up a little bit. But I've seen it not as Secretary of State. I've seen the interagency as National Security Advisor, and it's something that I think we'll have news on fairly soon.
Will it be timely help? Will it be help that we can send them quickly that they need?
Yeah, in particular, I mean, the one thing we always worry about is in the winter, because winter will come again, and they had a pretty brutal winter last year, and there's indications it could be just as brutal this year, especially their inability to generate energy. So there is urgency in trying to get this resolved and delivered.
Well, let me also ask you this question. I realize with the Straits of Hormuz, we found ourselves buying oil from the Russians. Was that the understanding?
So Treasury has lifted on a short-term basis the sanctions on the sale of some Russian oil, primarily as a trade-off, unfortunately, but designed to get more oil into the market to try to stabilize global prices. But this is not a permanent change to our policy. It's a time-limited one that was just recently extended by, I believe, by another 30 days.
Not that long ago, we characterized Russia as one of the 4 hard targets in the world for the United States. Are they still?
They clearly still remains a challenge. And back to your point that you made a moment ago, I don't think there's any doubt at this point in the minds of most observers around the world, and I would say in the minds of some inside of Russia, that the invasion of Ukraine has been a strategic disaster for them. They are not going to achieve the objectives they set out on day one for certain, and they may not even be able to militarily ever achieve the objectives they're demanding now in negotiations. I would also say that how we have viewed it is this war has no military solution. It has to have a negotiated settlement to it. And that's the role we've tried to play, and it's been a difficult role to play because, frankly, we're not an impartial mediator. We sanction Russia, and we are providing and have sold weapons through the Pearl program, which has remained unimpeded, to the Ukrainians. Unfortunately, those talks have stalled in recent months for a variety of reasons. The Ukrainians have actually made some battlefield gains in the last month as well. The Russians are losing 5,000, not injured, dying. In fact, it is the first conflict, according to the Department of War, it is one of the first conflicts ever in which the death rate is higher than the casualty rate on the Russian side. It's the first time ever that you have more deaths than casualties. So you're right, not only are the Ukrainians bravely fighting, they're effectively fighting. So the role we want to play is if there's a way to negotiate this thing to a peaceful, because ultimately this is going to be, the end of this is going to be negotiated. But it's been difficult because the demands that both sides have in order to end it have been far apart to this point.
I'd like to take you to what happened last night, just 12 hours ago or so, when the Russians were attacking Ukraine and Kyiv again, killing civilians, while the Ukrainians were attacking the Russians in St. Petersburg. And they have destroyed some of their infrastructure and oil-producing facilities. It's especially embarrassing to Putin because this is the week of the Russian Davos. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Why did we...
Never attended, but I'm familiar with it.
I'm asking why the United States would send an official delegation to Vladimir Putin's Russian Davos to talk about economic development in Russia.
I'm not aware of the delegation that went. I'm aware of the event. I know they were hosting one, But I don't think it would have been a high-level official.
I'm not sure what level it is, but to think that we had anything official, and it included Steven Seagal, the actor, as one of the people representing the United States. Are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with who he is.
I am too.
Yeah, I'm not. Look, so not a government official. Back to your point, because I think the broader point is, and you just raised it a moment ago about these attacks. What's changed? Russia's always been capable of these long-range strikes into Kyiv. You've seen an increase in intensity as a result, of what you've pointed out and the fact that the Ukrainians have been effective against them. That's been the one dynamic that's changed in the last few months. Is Ukraine has become increasingly effective at conducting long-range strikes deep into Russia and deep against critical nodes of the Russian economy. And I think one of the things it reminds us of why it's important to try to bring this war to an end if we can, because the risk of escalation is real, more real than it was 2 years ago.
We have a sanctions bill here that might do that as well. I'd like to close with one personal note. You joined me when you were a member of the Senate in the Paul Simon Water for the World effort to bring clean drinking water and sanitation to some of the poorest people on earth. We've reached 76 million people with water, 58 million with sanitation. That program is still on the books. Are we going to fund it?
Yeah, we are. And in fact, it's about $100 million in total that we'll be spending again this year.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And on the sanctions bill, there's 36 seconds left. I know we've been working with you, Senator Graham, and perhaps others on the Office of Legal Counsel. You've been going back and forth on some language. So I think you'll get there on your bill in terms of what you need to have.